Good morning and welcome to the Sports Carnival live from the Trauma Center studios. All right, Packer fans, I'm sure you're way ahead of me on this, but now would be a good time to start drinking. Here's your host, Dave Carney.
What up, everybody? I'm Dave. This is Chad. We are broadcasting appropriately from the Trauma Center studios, powered by the recovery room. The Sports Carnival Chad is in full triage mode. The Green Bay Packers have lost their fifth game in a row, dropping to the fucking Lions, 15-9. And it wasn't even as close as the score might have indicated. We have got so much to cover here on the program this morning, but I don't think that Packer fans, generally Wisconsin folks in general, need that much prompting or that much prodding to go ahead and start drinking. But I think that your call this morning is going to be well-founded. It's going to land on open and active ears. I can already tell we're getting a number of messages. Bucks. Check this out. Fucking Green Bay last won a game on October 4th, okay? Milwaukee Brewers, Chad. The Milwaukee Brewers last the game on October 2nd. Put that into perspective. We have just seen the conclusion of, I'm telling you this. Wow. The Milwaukee Brewers last won a game on October 2nd. The Green Bay Packers last won a game on October 4th. The World Series is concluded. The Astros have won their second series in 6 years, defeating our Philadelphia Phillies, at least for the purposes of this World Series. The Green Bay Packers are 2 days, away from a win that the Brewers had. It's unbelievable. This was unbelievable. And Packer fans, you got to start getting in touch now because Joe DeGuano will join us at 8:30. We have got a lot to break down. This game yesterday versus Detroit, Chad, was, I think, the worst game I have ever seen Aaron Rodgers play in his entire career. Like, when at least mostly healthy, right? When at least mostly healthy. This was as bad as it has ever been for the Packers and for Aaron Rodgers.
I personally love my favorite interception. Let's go through that because there's 3 of them. My favorite interception was the one off the helmet. That one was like, who was he throwing it to? And then I love his reaction. Like, who's he mad at? You should be mad at yourself.
Dude, I started tweeting about this. I started tweeting about this all day yesterday. And for those that want to climb our poll, like Morningwood, P12 Foreman, Jimmy the Haggerty, Joey Miller, Marengo Mike, UWL's Thomas, Neil Duda, fellas, go to our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney. You're all members of the Sports Carnival Facebook group page. Take this morning's Twitter poll question because we've got to, if you're in my shoes right now, we've got to see what Jordan Love is going to do because you look at the game yesterday, I'm so mad at these players. I started tweeting about this, Chad. Who the fuck is this guy mad at besides himself? I mean, seriously. And then they pull a great play out, the third interception, which was the David Bakhtiari trick play, an offensive tackle who played half a game yesterday. Congratulations. A trick play that Rodgers completely underthrew. These used to be throws that the dude would make in his sleep. He was atrocious. He was absolutely, categorically atrocious. And at this point, and we've got a slide that we'll pull up later, even Lil Wayne, Chad, who I don't know if you knew Lil Wayne was a huge Green Bay Packer fan. Okay? I did not. Dude, Lil Wayne yesterday on Twitter says, season's over, and the Packers should have traded Aaron Rodgers last year. This has just gotten so bad. You've even got celebrity fans pulling the carpet out saying, this thing is done.
Was the interception you're referring to David Bakhtiari, that was the one he threw off of his back foot, if I remember right. Was that correct?
Yes.
That was the worst
bad throw.
That was the worst throw that he made, I believe, because that was just horrible. It was underthrown off his back foot, backpedaling. But still, my favorite was the one off the helmet because that was almost like football follies or something. I mean,
it's like the butt fumble of Mark Sanchez's. Right, he had butt fumble there.
It's the Lions. Okay, as I put on the scroll, the only thing worse than being a Lions fan is losing to the Lions. This is rock bottom, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't go down any further than this. I mean, then you got to still look at their schedule. They got to play the Cowboys next. Not going to win that game. Then they got to play the Titans. Not going to win that game.
Nope.
At Chicago, maybe. I don't know. I mean, then a bye week.
Listen, and let's throw this out here real quick because we got a lot to talk about. And listen, for the most part, the state of Wisconsin was on a winning streak this weekend. The Badgers, we'll talk about that. Johnny Davis for the G League, we'll talk about that. The Bucks look great, and UW lacrosse was amazing as well. And Bucky Hoop starts tonight too, which is very good. But Rob Dog, so Rob Dog from Stoddard, though, was checking in. And listen, you mentioned that Bears game, right? Yeah. So the Bears were getting beat up by the Miami Dolphins yesterday in Chicago. But Justin Fields, listen, I don't know exactly what this kid's going to be, but he had himself a historic day. So the first quarterback in the history of the league to throw for 3 touchdowns and run for over 150 yards in a game. And you've got Rob Dog up here. Somehow the Bears lost when Fields had 178 rushing yards. Okay, Rob, did you watch that game? Because if you watched that game, you saw why the Bears lost. The fact that they came back and actually gave the Miami Dolphins a run for it was impressive to me, Chad. At this point in time, I'm looking at this Packer team. They put up 9 points on the Lions. The Lions were giving up by far the most points in the NFL this season, 32.5 points a game, 5 more than any other team in the league. And Green Bay was able to muster 9 points. I don't know that they can beat anybody. And when you look at this schedule, I do not know if there is a win left on the schedule right now. Really and truly, you can't just count that next Lions game as a sure win. The Vikings are going to beat these guys to death. And I think Chicago could win too.
I think the Packers made the Lions look like an all-pro defense yesterday. I mean, if you're watching that game, and of course I was watching on Red Zone, so it was in and out, right? It was skipping around different games and stuff. When I was watching that game, I'm like, man, the Lions defense looks really good. And then I realized, no, just the Packers offense is that bad. That's really what it came down to.
And listen, we can go through, and I'm so glad that we're not seeing it so much this morning, at least from what I can tell on these comments. But we can go through all the different excuses and finger-pointing exercises that we want to do. Lots of players got injured. Rashawn Gary may be out for the season with a torn ACL. These things may be true. Aaron Rodgers has to play better. He just really does. And he was, if not the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons that the Packers lost yesterday. Stick around. We are broadcasting live, as I mentioned, apropos from the Trauma Center Studios, powered by the Recovery Room. This is the one and only Sports Carnival. We'll be back in about 45 seconds. What can I say? The Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi Street is not only my favorite bar in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin, it's my favorite restaurant in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin. Breakfast served 8 to noon, Saturday and Sundays, daily specials, incredible cocktails, and the best damn wait staff in the entire city. My buddy Matt knows how to treat you right, and that's why when you go to the Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi, you're always going to have a great time and a great meal with a great cocktail. So if you haven't been in a while, or perhaps you're just regular and you want to stop in again, make it a thing. I'm there every single week. How about you?
Hi, I'm Irene, and I care about you. That's why I started Care Packages by Irene, or CPBI. At CPBI, we have a wide range of care packages, from I care about you but don't get too clingy, to I'm completely obsessed with you and you should probably get a restraining order, and everything in between. Because it's CPBI, if you care, we care.
Visit us online at carepackagesbyirene.omg.
Now back to the action live from the Trauma Center Studios. This is the one and only Sports Carnival. Nets star Kevin Durant is reportedly interested in becoming part owner of the Washington Commanders. Apparently being part of one mediocre sports franchise just isn't enough. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
I'm Dave. This is Chad. Welcome back to the Sports Carnival. Appreciate y'all being with us this morning. Thanks so much to our presenting sponsors, Kyle Cable, One Trust, Real Estate, Preferred Insurance, Tony Russo, Brian Sandmeyer, and of course the Midwest Mortgage Team, Mike Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi. Our supporting sponsors, yes, the Coos, which this thing is taking on a life all of its own. Todd Vercruzzi's Hot Tub and Jacuzzis is a store that people are flocking to downtown La Crosse to see. Our supporting sponsors, Chad, Joe's Helping Hand Landscaping, and Sean O'Neill, the O'Neill Law Firm. Thanks so much to every one of you guys for being a part of the program. And if you want to get in touch, like I've mentioned, hit us up on our YouTube page, our Twitch page. If you've got something to share with us on Facebook, become a part of the Sports Carnival group page, Chad. It's just a barrel full of monkeys. And sometimes I actually think that a barrel full of monkeys might have been a better team, a better collection than what we saw yesterday from the Green Bay Packers. If you didn't watch yesterday's game because, I don't know, you were on a separate planet outside of the state of Wisconsin, you missed one of the worst performances in the history of Aaron Rodgers. I can't say the history of the Green Bay Packers because we're not going back that far. Packers have had some rough times. But, Chad, in the history of Aaron Rodgers as quarterback, I don't know that we have seen a lot of worse games than we saw yesterday. For the first time in Rodgers' career, he threw 2 interceptions in a goal-to-go situation. Think about that. The first time in the man's career, Chad, a Hall of Fame career, no doubt, Super Bowl champion, 4-time MVP, multiple-time All-Pro and Pro Bowler, has never thrown 2 interceptions goal-to-go. The Packers actually amassed plenty of yards yesterday against the Lions. They went on many, many long drives, which is part of the problem because they can't score quickly, which is what the Packers used to do. But when you look at the Packers rolling up 389 yards of offense, but throwing the ball away 2 times in the red zone, you can't point too many other fingers if you're Aaron Rodgers at anybody else but himself. My thought is the Packers need to pull Aaron and put in Jordan Love. They need to go to this kid. If for no other reason, it can't get any worse than what we've seen. It cannot get any worse. There is nothing that Jordan Love could do worse than what Aaron Rodgers did yesterday. The other things that I would consider with a Jordan Love taking over this quarterback position, Chad, and believe me, I'm no fan of Jordan Love. I think this guy is a scrub, but at least you would keep Aaron Rodgers from getting hurt for the rest of the season, because look at the kind of injuries that the Packers sustained yesterday. If you pull Rodgers now, you know that you're going to lose for the most part. You see what at least Jordan Love can do, and then, Chad, you keep this guy healthy. If, in fact, Aaron Charles Rodgers, the anointed one, ayahuasca Aaron, if, in fact, he does want to come back next year, at least you keep this guy nice and healthy so that he doesn't take the beating, which seems to be coming from every single team in the league. The Lions were the worst defensive team by far. It wasn't even close. They gave up 800 points to Seattle. Seattle's still scoring touchdowns from that game that they played against Detroit in. And yet the Green Bay Packers mustered 9 points. 9 points.
Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. And how do you pull Aaron Rodgers, though, without some other kind of excuse other than he's playing bad? Because you don't think that would actually happen. Do you think Matt LaFleur will do that, or will it be the thumb injury, or will it be some other thing that gets Aaron Rodgers off the field other than poor performance? I just don't see that happening.
Well, nothing's going to make this happen except for the Green Bay Packers organizationally, Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, Mark Murphy, and Aaron Rodgers saying, look, this is over and we've got to pull it. Now, this isn't going to happen, right? We know that, but that's why we have a poll question up this morning on our Twitter feed with 63.6% of respondents so far this morning at the Sports Carnival saying, give Love a chance when asked, is it time to pack it up for Rodgers and this team and just see what the team has, bank those NFL draft picks, which look, at 3-6 right now, the Packers are only a half a game up on Detroit, who is 2-6. The Vikings win yesterday, come from behind. That was a gutsy win for the Cousins against Taylor Heineke in Washington. They were playing their hearts out. So you've got the Vikings at 7-1. The Bears, they didn't win yesterday, but they surely don't look like they're worse than the Packers. What does Green Bay have to gain, I guess is my question, by playing Aaron Rodgers for the rest of the season? Do you need to see what you've got in Rodgers? No, you pretty much know. You've got diminishing return on investment. You paid this guy $140 million or whatever it was. He's not as good as he used to be, which, again, not surprising, the fact that he keeps getting older. It's not like he was 27 coming off a season in which he was ascending. He's like 37 going down, but at least you, I guess, could see what this kid Love has, if anything, and then you get a better draft pick, because if you go 3-14 or 5-12 at this particular juncture, what do you gain as a Green Bay Packer organization? Nothing. What do you lose? Positions in the draft. That's it. I mean, really and truly now, this should be looked at as a position in the draft. I know Packer fans don't want to say that, but this season is over. Look at Lil Wayne's tweet here from last night. And dude, this guy is as big of a Packer fan as I have ever seen in the celebrity world. RIP to the season. We should have gotten rid of 12 before the season. We should have gotten rid of 12 before the season. I don't know that I can argue with this logic right now. I really don't. This season has turned out to be a complete clusterfuck.
Lil Wayne is also known as Wheezy. I did not know that.
Yes, he is.
He's known as Wheezy as well. When Wheezy's calling you out, you know you've had a bad day. The thing is, obviously, if they pull him, let's say that happens, then they are signaling to all of their fans the season is over with.
Yes.
So continuing to have Aaron Rodgers play would be, hey, we're trying to salvage the season. In your opinion, you say pull the plug.
What's the difference? At this point, you're a 3-6 football team. And I say this just as a pragmatist, okay? And Chad, we know that that's not always the way that fans like to roll. but I've worked in pro sports. You've worked in pro radio. You see how this goes. At a certain point, you need to look institutionally, organizationally towards the future, okay? If Aaron Rodgers was 27, not 37, I think it's a completely different story. You roll this thing out there, you just let it all bounce how it's going to bounce, and it lands where it lands. Right now, though, if I'm Green Bay, I've made an incredible investment into this man, Aaron Rodgers, in order to keep him upright, because we've got somebody from Facebook checking in saying the wide receivers, offensive line have to be the worst in the league. Cool. If that's true, what do you think this spells for Rodgers for the rest of the season? He obviously doesn't trust these receivers. He made a couple of decent passes to Allen Lazard yesterday. He did. Yeah, and Lazard made a couple of really nice catches, but he missed a lot of wide open throws. There were guys that were wide open. Now, when you go back, and we'll talk to Joe this morning at 8:30, who's probably already seen the All-22 film, but if you happen to go back and look at like the NFL Rewind, where you get the coach's view, Chad, of the whole game, and you look at the All-22, you're going to see Rodgers missing wide open receivers all over the field. So this isn't just about trust anymore. I really do think part of it is about aptitude and his abilities at this particular time. He throws a decent ball a lot, but he also underthrows, overthrows. The touch that Aaron Rodgers had on that football, Chad, probably better than I've really ever seen anybody have on the football, seems to have diminished. It's not gone, but it has diminished quite a bit. And when you look at what Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did last night, which, listen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers still get a D+ grade for how that game went. But Tom Brady, when it needed to be won at 470 years old, Tom Brady drove that fucking team down and won the game and beat the Rams. And keeps that squad in contention. This is what Aaron can't do anymore. And yes, the Packers may have a bad wide receiving core. And yes, they may have a bad offensive line. So basically, we're answering our own question. You should probably save this man for next year, considering that he's going to play till he's, 40? That's what Joe said to us last week. So if he's going to play till 40, you might as well save him this year. Get a look at what this Love kid is, because one of two things happens with Love. He booms or he busts. That's it. And they've already expended the first-round draft pick on him. If the Packers don't win another game, they get a top 5 draft pick again this year. Swell. Maybe you get a great offensive tackle. Maybe there's somebody from Georgia or Alabama that's coming up that can shore up that offensive line, whatever. But I just don't see where the value or where the benefit in playing Rodgers the rest of the season really is. I personally just don't see it.
Yeah, speaking of Georgia, I don't know if you saw over the weekend, Georgia beat Tennessee. I watched that game. That was a good game.
Yeah, that was a good game. They're a dominant squad. By the way, LSU beat Alabama. Alabama's out.
Yes.
Like, they're out.
Yeah, which is good because Nick Saban sucks. As far as Jordan Love goes, when is the last time he actually was on the field? That would be interesting to look up. I don't know that.
Preseason,
but I mean in a regular season game.
Last year, end of the regular season, he played, I want to say, a half. He played the last half against Detroit, a game that, by the way, the Packers lost. He
could be worse than Aaron Rodgers. And then you mentioned Tom Brady. Tom Brady was pedestrian through that whole entire game till the end, but he did come through. What you're saying is Aaron Rodgers doesn't have that anymore. And do you think it's physical or do you think it's a mental thing? To me, if anything, it's more mental than it is physical, because we've seen him make the throws he's always been able to make and throws only he can make, even in this season. Now, granted, it isn't sustained as long, right? You don't see it as often, but you do see it. So I don't think he's completely physically inept. I think there's some kind of mental issue there that's going on in his head, whether it's because he doesn't have confidence in his wide receivers, too much ayahuasca. I don't know, but clearly something is askew, is off with Aaron Rodgers more than normal.
Well, and I don't know that that's not true. And a lot of what we see with Rodgers is conjecture, because we don't know these guys any more than we know whomever is the actor on your favorite sitcom, right? We only see what we get to see based upon our viewpoint. But what I see from Rodgers is an incredible disconnection from the team. I really do. And Jair Alexander, we had a little graphic up there a second ago, which we don't need to. No, we don't need to put it back up. Jair Alexander yesterday had a couple of penalties that were inexplicable. I mean, he had a roughing, or he had an unnecessary roughness penalty, which was completely uncalled for. He had multiple blown assignments, and there was a couple of other times on special teams where I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? Maybe it wasn't special teams, but there were some other plays where I'm like, what is this guy doing? I think that Jair and Aaron Rodgers have gone back and forth a couple of times, because Jair said after, what was it, that loss to the New York Giants, if they would have lost to the Jets, there's a problem, right? So Aaron didn't like that, blew back on that. I see the disconnect with Rodgers and all of the teammates, and I see it so magnified when, just going back to last night's game with Tampa Tom against the Los Angeles Rams, look at the embrace that Tom had with all those teammates at the end. Byron Leftwich, the offensive coordinator, all the players. Yes, Brady has dressed these guys down on television and called out his offensive line, but you can still tell that Tom is part of that team in a way that is much more magnified and much more meaningful. Aaron doesn't look like he is part of this team. He feels to me, Chad, like he is on an island that, is out here while the rest of the Packers are over here. So is it physical? Part of it, because I do think that what we're seeing from Rodgers is what we saw from Jordan and the Wizards. And look, that comparison to me is only because we're talking about two of the greats. Jordan was still good with Washington. I mean, he averaged 20-some points. I mean, that's better than most NBA players. And you got glimpses. But over an 82-game season, in this case, over a 17-game season, the consistency just isn't there. And while we're reminded of what that guy used to be, he's just not the same. So part of it mental. I think that there's a disconnect with the team, and part of it is physical. I have to believe at least part of it is physical.
Well, crap, he threw 3 interceptions yesterday. There's been seasons where he's only thrown 3 in an entire season. So, I mean, he's at, 6 interceptions on the season thus far, I believe, something along those lines, which...
If not more, I'd have to take a look back, yeah.
I think that it hasn't been since 2017 since he's thrown that many, something along those lines. He's clearly, distracted. If it is because he's frustrated with his offensive line and his wide receivers, and I can see why, and I think there's merit there. I think, honestly, that I can see the struggles, but he isn't really, as you mentioned, and I think this is the key, doesn't seem to be doing anything to make that better. And then I think on top of that, going on Pat McAfee show every Wednesday and airing all of his grievances is not helping the situation. It'll be interesting to see what he says this week. If he goes on this week, maybe he won't. I don't know. I mean, because it would be hard, and we've heard him in the past. We're right where we need to be. I keep hearing that from him. I don't think losing to the Lions is right where you want to be. I don't think you can say that any longer.
No, this was an absolute and unmitigated disaster. And one of the tweets that I put out yesterday, by the way, follow me on Twitter at the Sports Carney, take this morning's poll question, all that good stuff. One of the things that I said yesterday on Twitter was this. I don't know that I can recall seeing a Green Bay Packer team that was as poorly coached, as underprepared, as undisciplined as I've seen since Mike McCarthy got fired in the middle of the season. And that was the only time, Chad, the Green Bay Packers had fired a head coach in the middle of the season. I see that Mike Byers, our favorite Texan in lacrosse, is checking in. At least the Longhorns won. That's cool. Neil Duda had something up here, though, too, where he said, if you don't stay positive and you perform poorly, it's a recipe for disaster. Skol Vikings. Now, again, not to go too heavy on this Vikings thing, because we got way too much to litigate with this Packers team, but this Vikings team was down and losing by 10 points to Washington. This Washington team was playing with some real juice. Kirk Cousins and company. Oh, and TJ Hawkinson, who was playing his first game with the Vikings, they seem to have a great connection. Now, Chad, this is something, and maybe Aaron Rodgers would like to have this riddled to him. How is it that TJ Hawkinson was able to catch passes from Kirk Cousins? They've only known each other for a couple of days. It would almost be like these are two professional football players that, being professional football players, were able to figure it out. This is where I struggle with the wide receivers. And for everybody that's telling me they're awful and they're just terrible, okay, but the margin of difference in the NFL is not that big. It really isn't. Like, from Devontae Adams to Equanimeous St. Brown, you might think is an enormous difference. It's not. It's really not. If these guys weren't good enough to play, they wouldn't be on the team. Trust me. The Packers didn't all of a sudden forget how to organizationally draft and develop players. Now, Matt LaFleur, is he a good coach? This is something that is in high debate right now, because you saw Matt LaFleur yesterday, and this is part of why that disconnect with Rodgers is so apparent. You saw Matt LaFleur yesterday, get dressed down by his quarterback, side-eyed, and really look like he was completely out of touch and rhythm with the actual football game. You could see him questioning some of the defensive calls, like looking up at the sky for his offensive coordinator, like, what is going on? I don't know about LaFleur, but I don't think that the Packers have just taken a bunch of the worst players in the NFL and thrown them out on the field. Because don't forget this, Packer fans, was it 9 weeks ago that we were all sitting here talking about this being a Super Bowl contending team because of how good it was going to be? I seem to remember that. So
Neil Duda says 9 catches for 70 yards, and he was only there for 48 hours.
God.
I think that's
I thought they need 6 or 8 months to buddy up and spend the night at each other's house and, go out for movies, date a bit before they were able to throw footballs.
I think that's a bullshit excuse, personally. As you said, these guys are all professionals. Professionals, no matter what the scheme is, they know football. You know how to run a route. Come on. I think that's bullshit. I read this article about pre-snap reads and post-snap reads, and that Aaron Rodgers primarily does mostly pre-snap reads, and you'll notice that in the game. And that could lend to the difficulties he's having some with these young wide receivers because they're not necessarily in the spots because he's throwing to spots as opposed to post-snap reads where it's a little bit more organic. And I saw that a couple of times when there was success where it was a post-snap read. I think that they were more successful. I'm going back a game or two. But that is something that I've noticed as well. And maybe that goes back to your coaching deal. Is Matt LaFleur the problem? Clearly everybody's scratching their head and nobody has an answer to it. That's the bottom line right now. Not to steal from Joe D, but that's the bottom line. Nobody seems to have an answer on that team, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur, or anybody else in that organization.
Well, and I think it's got to be a combination of them all. I mean, if we're going to be true to what football is, it's not one person's fault that any of these things happen. It's a combination of all of them. But I did also put up a tweet yesterday about Matt LaFleur, and I used the analogy that the emperor has no clothes. Because when you watch what this guy is or isn't able to do, he doesn't feel like he's got an institutional control of the team. You look at a guy like Andy Reid. You look at a guy like, even Mike Vrabel for that Tennessee Titans team last night, playing with Malik Willis at quarterback and nearly beating the Chiefs, taking them to overtime. You can see coaching. We've mentioned Brian Daboll because, look, I didn't think that Brian Daboll was going to be this good with the Giants. Look at what Robert Saleh is doing with the Jets. Not only do they beat the Packers,
huge win.
They beat the Bills. And the Bills just made the Packers look like a C team, right? And the Bills fall to the New York Jets. Zach Wilson, for as bad of a game as he had, not this weekend, but the weekend prior, where he threw awful interceptions, back foot interceptions, terrible picks. He looked competent for this New York Jets team. The Packers right now are in an incredibly tough way. And that's why, thankfully, we've got our green and gold insider, Joe DeGuano, who will join us here coming up in just a few minutes to help us work through some of this. Because, Chad, the bottom line is this. Joe DeGuano, at the end of the day, is going to have a very hot take, I believe, on this Green Bay Packers squad. If you've just joined the Sports Carnival this morning, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios powered by the Recovery Room, Packers lose to the Lions 15-9. Take this morning's poll question on our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney. If you're a member of the Facebook group page, the poll question is there. Is it time for the Packers to move on from Rodgers this year and play Jordan Love? The Wisconsin Badgers got a nice win. Jim Leonard up to 3-1. The Bucks are 9-0 on the season, and the University of Wisconsin Lacrosse's Eagles football team flying high. We've got a lot left to cover, but when we return, Joe DeGuano will be joining us from the road here on the Sports Carnival. Stick around. The official mortgage team of the Sports Carnival is the Midwest mortgage team of Land Home Financial, my good buddies Mike Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi. Listen, we all know the mortgage industry is in a bit of an upheaval right now, and that's why it's more important than ever to go to a couple of guys that you can trust, a local operation right here in La Crosse. That is the Midwest mortgage team. Again, Michael Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi of Land Home Financial. Don't make a mistake with your mortgage needs. Go to the official mortgage provider of the Sports Carnival, the Midwest mortgage team, Mike Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi.
Now more than ever, if you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps an investment property, you need a full-time dedicated real estate agent who is up to date on all the latest trends and analysis and is ready to give you the kind of service that you deserve. That's why the official real estate agent and the official real estate partner of the Sports Carnival is Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate. Whether you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps you are a seasoned investor, call the official real estate agent partner of the Sports Carnival, Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate.
And back to the action, live the Sports Carnival, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. Did you see that game in Cincinnati yesterday? The Bengals scored more often than Zach Wilson on Mother's Day. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
Damn, coming out shots fired. Zach Wilson, man, I tell you what, this kid's getting a bad rap, okay? Just because he's a MILF hunter doesn't mean anything. Because he wants a couple of cougar steaks on his plate, so what? It's fine.
I say kudos to Zach Wilson.
Absolutely. I say kudos to anybody that can do whatever they want. And here on the Sports Carnival, we're able to pretty much fly loose and do whatever we want. Joe DeGuano, our green and gold insider, who's been joining my program for Chad the last 5 years, giving us all sorts of sage wisdom, advice, helping triage Packer fans through times both good and bad. Joining us from parts unknown, the Mad Dog of Madison himself, Jody, top of the morning. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Chad. When you started talking about Zach Wilson and Mills, it reminded me of Andy Sandberg and Justin Timberlake. I'm a mother lover. You're a mother lover. It is one of the best. That was the follow-up to Dick in a Box.
That's right.
It just was. It was beautiful. So I think Zach Wilson needs to join the two of them, and because he's a mother lover, and who's not?
He really is. Joe, we'd love to talk about Zach Wilson's mother loving. We'd love to switch gears, go to Badgers and Bucks and all these things.
Can't we talk about the Bucks? Can't we talk about the Bucks?
Right.
Not yet, because I told Joe on Twitter yesterday, the royal we likes to take all the credit when these things go right and we bask in the glory. So none of us can take off one of these kinds of days. And Joe, let's just jump right into it. Give us your overall assessment of the game yesterday and what exactly, in your estimation, went wrong.
Everything. Everything. When your go-to fourth down play is throwing to your left tackle, who's obviously 2 years removed from a bad knee surgery, and your MVP quarterback, continues to throw the ball short, whether it be long to Toure or the one to Bakhtiari. I mean, it's brutal right now, and there's such a disconnect right now between Rodgers and LaFleur, and you said it, Dave, that you can point fingers everywhere. And when you look at the breaking down of a franchise, and now I'm not saying doom and gloom is on its way and it's back to the 70s and 80s, but it is kind of a trickle down, because you go back and this all was set in motion. All of the problems that Green Bay has had on the field and off the field can point back to Gutekunst taking Jordan Love. Now, I'm not putting this all on Goody. Goody inherited a talentless franchise. So, I'm not trying to say it's all Goody, but when you start looking at the breakdown of a franchise, you look at that, because then Aaron Rodgers starts pouting. And then Aaron Rodgers starts pouting, so Devontae Adams doesn't sign the extension that was on the table 2 years ago. And then Devontae's not happy because they pulled the offer off. And it's this trickle down right now, you guys, and there's a lot of fingers to be pointed. And right now, I don't know if Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers are going to be able to coexist after this year. And again, I think, Green Bay, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is retiring. He's got $100 million after this year. And so I'm almost guaranteeing that Aaron Rodgers is going to continue to play. He's not going to retire. Do you dump Matt LaFleur then? Because you've got a guy who's won 13 games in a row, 3 years in a row, and now he's having a bad season. So this thing is ugly right now, and the only thing you can, because I'm going to go Jim Mora. Playoffs? Fuck that. I mean, there is no chance of playoffs with this football team. And so what you've got to look at is how can you salvage the rest of this year? You have a lot of decisions to make this coming off season, and can the Green Bay Packers get this ship righted down the road? Can they make the last 2 years of Aaron Rodgers' career in Green Bay something memorable, or is it going to be something shitty? But this thing is off the tracks, and I will tell you, there's something stinking at 1265 Lombardi. This is really stinking from the head down, and if it doesn't get fixed, this could be an ugly divorce this offseason.
Hey, Joe, do you see an appearance from Jordan Love coming soon, or is that off the table in your opinion?
You know what? It shouldn't be off the table, but I think it's going to be. And because Green Bay has put themselves in this position where, Aaron has so much fucking control now. And again, everyone made their bed, so goddamn it, sleep in it now, and the fans have to sleep in it too. I don't see it. The ideal solution. I thought about this morning, and I never ever, as a coach, as someone who watches football, never pray for an injury. All right, I never hope for an injury, but the ideal situation is Rodgers, tweaks the ankle or does something that puts him out for a few games, so you actually can see what Jordan Love can do. Because January, this clock starts ticking on Jordan Love, and Green Bay has, starting in January, to make a decision, because if they take the option, the 50-year option, Jordan Love's salary in 2023 becomes $20 million, guys.
What?
And yes,
For a backup?
For his fifth-year option, it's 20?
$20 million next year is what Green Bay will end up paying him. And so, you got to figure out what you've got right now. And again, like I said, if you could have Rodgers, tweak his ankle for a few games and just kind of sit him down so you can see what's happening. I mean, think about this, guys. You got Aaron Rodgers on the hook for 50 and Jordan Love on the hook for 20. You got $70 million on the hook next year if you take that 50-year option.
So, all right, Joe, we've got a Facebook group member checking in this morning and saying you can't bench Aaron unless or until the Packers are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. There are 8 games left. 9 wins is still possible. Now, mathematically, I understand where a Facebook user is going with that, but don't let your eyes lie to you.
No.
Your eyes are telling you the truth. This is not a Packer playoff team. It's really not. And, Joe, this is where, as an organization, and what I'm going to say is probably not going to happen, but as an organization, this is where the Green Bay Packers are. And this would have happened 15, 25 years ago without question. As an organization, the Packers would tell Aaron Rodgers and should tell him, your thumb is causing you to not play football well. We need you to see a specialist, and we need to get this figured out. You're going to go sit in the bench. Now, Chad mentioned this earlier. Can you bench him for poor performance? Absolutely you can. The problem lies having to then deal with this man, his salary, and his enormous ego, what that does to the team next year. Here's what I would do if I'm the Green Bay Packers and I'm Brian Gutekunst. I'm pulling the plug on Rodgers because I don't want to get this guy hurt. He needs to maintain whatever he's got left so that he can be a trade piece next year. The marriage is broken. When Lil Wayne says they should have traded him anyways, this is over. Because Joe DeGuado knows Lil Wayne's about as reverent of a Packer fan as there is. Dude, he wrote the song Green and Yellow, which gets played in Packer games.
That sounds ridiculous.
I mean, look, here's the thing, and again, I've talked a lot about the bad old days of the Green Bay Packers, and when you break down where a franchise can go, the Green Bay Packers right now are at that precipice, because you go back, and actually, I can go back to the 70s, all right? Lombardi leaves very quickly. Phil Bengtson, not in any position to be a head coach, gets the gig. The Green Bay Packers had a couple of guys that said no to them. They get Dan Devine. Dan Devine then mortgages the future of the franchise to go out and get John Hadel. And then they think Bart Starr is ready. And then Bart Starr his scouts want them to draft a guy by the name of Ronnie Lott, but Bart Starr drafts Rich Campbell. I mean, you look at how a franchise can slip, and you look at again through the years the decisions that this franchise made, and I got to tell you, they're right there. They are right there again, and I don't know if because I go back to the structure of the Green Bay Packers. DC, you and I have talked about this. Without an owner, without someone holding accountability here, it always goes back to the structure of this team. And I used to think growing up, what a cool concept. The city owns the team, no greedy owners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'm really starting to question whether or not it's the structure that causes these problems, where you don't have a hierarchy that you can trust and a hierarchy that you can count on. Because, is Mark Murphy going to step in and now say that he fucked up by naming Gutekunst? And we all know Mark Murphy had a lot to say about Matt LaFleur. So you're saying it's a really fucked up situation in Green Bay. like I said, I'm not trying to spell doom and gloom for Packer fans, but when you look at the small decisions, or they seem like small decisions at the time, it creates this domino effect in a franchise. And Green Bay's right there right now. They are stuck, and they are stuck with 12, and they are stuck in this situation. Like I said, point back, you draft Jordan Love, Rodgers starts to pout, Devontae starts to pout. And going back even further than that, how Ted Thompson had left this organization puts Gutekunst in a situation where he's got to sign Billy Turner for a lot of money, Zadarius Smith for a lot of money, Preston Smith for a lot of money, Adrian Amos for a lot of money. And there's only so much money to go around. So, again, we are right there, guys. I've seen it before in the 70s and 80s, and we are right there again, and it scares the fuck out of me.
So I completely understand why, for Green Bay Packer fans, this is like, threat level midnight, to borrow from our friends at the office, right? This is all sorts of bad. And then this morning's poll question, if you're just checking in on Twitter at the Sports Carnival, our Facebook group page, is asking you if you think the Packers should pull Rodgers for the season and go to Love. Here's where I think the Packers are okay. Milt Hendrickson, who is the director of player personnel, is a guy, Chad, that came from the Baltimore Ravens organization. Milt's actually an area resident. Like, he came from the area of Wisconsin where I live right now, in Stoddard, DeSoto. This guy's as good as it comes when it comes to identifying talent. Brian Gutekunst, I think, has been an aggressive general manager based upon what the Packers can do in their history, and has made some swings and misses. Rashawn Gary, we're not even talking about him. He's out for the season. He's got a torn ACL. And Gary had finally started to pop. Chad, that was a guy that Gutekunst took in the first round, number 13, a move that I questioned at the time. I wasn't sure if that was going to work. Where I think the Packers are going to be okay is in the development, the draft and develop nature of what it is that they do. However, what you've mentioned, and you've talked about this for years, about the lack of an owner at the top, a Jerry Jones, a whoever the fuck it is, an owner at the top to say, no, we're not going through this and we're going to move on. Look at what the Texans did with Deshaun Watson. They benched this kid for a year, traded him off. He didn't want to play. The Texans did the right thing. They get rid of an albatross. They get back a Hall. They're going to rebuild the franchise. So I think the Packers will be fine. I don't think it goes back to the 70s, but I do wonder if there isn't a breaking point, a line in the sand, Joe, the crossing of the Rubicon, if you will, between LaFleur and Rodgers, where the organization's got to make a choice. If it were me, I'd probably stay with the coach at this point, because a coach has a longer career and a longer trajectory than the player does. If the organization can draft the right guys, and if the coach actually had control, institutional control of the game plan, which I'm not sure that he does, and we've thought this was a potential for many years, then who knows what it would be. When I was watching the Packers play the Bears at Lambeau, they ran the ball, they ran it effectively, and you could see LaFleur's system work. When Rodgers doesn't get to throw the ball, though, he pouts like a little bitch and starts to whine and complain. Then they want him to chuck it. But, dude, he can't do the same thing he used to, right? So if you're Aaron, you won't accept coaching. You won't take the game plan. You want to throw the ball, but you can't. This is a no-win situation for the Packers. To me, Little Wayne, I'm going back to Wheezy, Chad. Little Wayne was right. Should have got rid of this dude, and let bygones be bygones. See what you've got with whoever it is you've got, and then just go forward. This happens to every team. It really does. At some point, you're a great quarterback, retire. Nothing lasts forever. And this thing is over between these two. It really looks like, at least right now, this is not a workable situation.
So you think Wheezy's thinking Jordan Love should be moving on up?
Yeah, he's like, all you got to do is try for a little love.
Oh, Chad, well done. Well done, George Jefferson. Well done.
Thank you.
Here's the thing, and honestly, guys, yes, the Matt LaFleur offense, we talked about it at the end of McCarthy. McCarthy's thing was let the players play, let the players make the plays. The players will get this thing done, not the scheme, not the system. And we all talked about LaFleur, that he schemes guys open, et cetera, et cetera. And really, you're not seeing that anymore. This offense is very reminiscent to 2018, the last hurrah for McCarthy and Rodgers. And if they don't get back to the basic tenets of this offense, and I will say this, I don't want to make excuses, but I think Christian Watson being hurt has hurt this team drastically, because when you got a guy that can take the top off the defense, I think that makes a huge difference. That being said, you're not seeing the Matt LaFleur offense that we bought. And whether it's Rodgers putting there, let's put it this way. do you think that was Matt LaFleur calling the David Bakhtiari tight end special, or do you
I
think
fucking
that
hope
was
not.
or that was that David Bakhtiari's bestie, Aaron Rodgers, saying this will be super cool. We'll get Dave a touchdown. I mean, it doesn't work that way. And Rodgers back in the day could get away with his shit. And Rodgers today is not the quarterback he once was. He can't get away with it anymore. He needs to turn into John Elway, but he won't.
Joe, on that note, which is a high one, we're going to let you off here. And Neil Duda said, when you let the Pirates run the ship, eventually there will be a mutiny. And it really feels like Neil the Duda, a Viking fan, no less, is probably onto something. Jody, listen, thank you so much for joining us this morning and not trying to go Bucks and Badgers, who, by the way, both look great. Also did UWL, looked great, but giving us some of your insight here on the Green Bay Packers. We'll catch up with you again next Monday on the show, my friend. Be well.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey, real quick, boys. Did you like that 1985 picture of me on Twitter, DC?
Oh, male model Joe DeGuano? Absolutely. Handsome dude right there.
Later.
Peace out.
Preferred Insurance is the official auto, home, business, flood, and life insurance agency of the Sports Carnival, serving folks in La Crosse and surrounding areas with licenses in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. As an independent insurance agency, Preferred Insurance is free to find the very best insurance for you, your family, or your business needs. Call my friends at Preferred Insurance today and set up a free consultation. Remember, working with an independent agency means Preferred Insurance works for you, with you, to find the best solutions at the best prices.
Hey, it's time for koozies, hot tub, and jacuzzis in downtown La Crosse. Whether you're looking to relax after a hard day's work, or maybe you're up for a little soak and poke, we got you covered. That's right, when you're in the market for a hot tub or jacuzzi, all you have to do is call the Coos. 555-SOAK. That's 555-7625.
Soak and poke is a slang term for hot tub sex. Please practice responsibly.
Now back to the action live from the Trauma Center studios. This is the one and only Sports Carnival. Harry Carey said it best. Booze, bras, and bullshit. If you got all that, what else do you need? Go Cubs! Cubs win! Here's your host, Dave Kearney.
Oh, man. Old Harry Carey. Those glasses, by the way, a lot of people don't know that. That's a NASA project. They actually use those things to start magnification fires on different planets, exoplanets, if you will. Jim Tim, also known as Jimmy the Haggerty, checking in this morning and says this, guys, I agree that Rodgers needs to be done, but you can't not see the coaching on all sides of the game that needs so much work. The Packers on defense actually had been okay. The Packers gave up 15 points, guys. They gave up 15 points. Packers defense was fine. Special teams, that wasn't as bad as it's been. The offense. It's the offense. It's Rodgers. When you give up 15 points in the National Football League and you average 18, which is what the Packers came in averaging, simple math tells me you should win that football game. The Packers were favored by about 3.5 points, which would make 18 to 15 about right. The Green Bay Packers scored 9 points. So while we can look at the coaching, and these are all truisms, we also have to just say what it is. It's like when I was watching Kobe Bryant at the end of his career being coached by Byron Scott, friend of the team. Kobe was awful, and the Lakers won 17 games, 20 games, but you got to see this guy go out and play some basketball. For fans, that was fun. If this is what the Packers are doing, just giving fans an homage to Aaron Rodgers so that they can see a human being that is in a jersey that used to be good and you remembered him from those times, then fine. Then that's what this is, and call it what it is. Listen, we have no intentions of winning football games, but we understand that you're a fan of this guy and you want to see him in his jersey get rolled out here. Okay. But if you're going to tell me as an organization, the best thing to do right now is to give Aaron Rodgers the rest of this season, because at 3-6, this thing's over. It's over. They're not climbing into the postseason at all. So if you're telling me the best thing to do is give Rodgers the rest of the season, I disagree. I push back on that.
Well, some news that got dropped on me today. I had no idea that Jordan Love was going to be owed $20 million. So I
wasn't sure that was the number either.
Okay. If you got a backup quarterback you're going to owe $20 million, and you've got a struggling starting QB that's the end of his career that apparently does not get along with the head coach, I mean, there's a couple of decisions you can make here, and one of them being you move on from Aaron Rodgers and you paid Jordan Love, or you got to move on from Jordan Love, right? I mean, those are the two decisions. They're not going to keep both at that $70 million. If you have $70 million worth of quarterbacks and no one to catch it, does it make a noise in the woods? I mean, basically, it's one of those, old riddles, right? I mean, think about that. $70 million worth of quarterbacks and no one to throw it to doesn't do you any good unless they throw to each other.
And Joey Miller says trade Russell Wilson for Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, 5 years ago, which was what I had suggested 5 years ago. I did. I said, listen, trade Rodgers for a guy that was a Wisconsin Badger, even if it was only for a year. Trade him for Russell Wilson. I had a family over here at my house, as a matter of fact. And the wife of my friend looked at me like I had taken a steaming shit on her kitchen floor when I suggested that. She did. She looked at me like, I don't know if this woman has ever liked me since that moment, because Aaron Charles Rodgers was such a vaunted, not just a celebrity, Chad, but we're talking angelic, heroic, probably somebody ascended to this planet from another world altogether because of his overall greatness. Yeah, that lasts until you start throwing, as Mike Byers was mentioning, balls into the dirt and overthrowing guys. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, we got to get rid of this guy. The Packers probably won't move on from Rodgers because, as Joe mentioned, they're sort of hamstrung by the way that they go about this organization in a lot of ways. At the end of the day, though, to borrow from Joe, I don't really see what the overall benefit of playing Rodgers is, which is why we put up this morning's poll question. Chad, 72% of respondents on our Twitter feed, which is at the Sports Carney, say, give Love a chance. You brought up a Wheezy thing, a different Wheezy. I'm going back to the Beatles. Give Love a chance, 72.2%, while 27.8% are being a bit stubborn and saying, no, you've got to drag this thing out for 17 games. Brutal. You want to see Aaron Rodgers, what he's going to look like at the end of the season? And now look, Rashawn Gary on defense is out. Bakhtiari's a shell of himself. None of these wide receivers can catch, and we're told that the offensive line is the worst in the league. Okay, good luck with that, Rodgers, because that to me sounds like 800 sacks coming over the last 9 games.
Here's an insult to injury, Rob Dog. Aaron Rodgers completed his transformation into Jay Cutler on Sunday. Woo! That cuts deep. That cuts deep. I'll tell you what, at this point, if I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, I'd rather have Justin Fields on my team, honestly, after what I saw yesterday. Granted, they lost, but he looked actually pretty impressive. In the couple games I've watched him, I think the biggest problem he has, he keeps getting hit from every direction, and he's forced to run. But I think at some point they're going to have to make that decision, and it'll be interesting to see how long Aaron Rodgers can put up with it, right? How long is he going to allow himself to look this bad before there is some kind of injury or something happens where it'll be a mutual decision, but he's no longer in the game. You know what I mean? Because they're playing the Cowboys next at home. Then they got to host the Titans, and then I believe they have a bye week.
So here's what I think happens, because I know that Jimmy the Haggerty is going to the game, the Cowboys-Packers game coming up on Sunday. They're going to roll Rodgers out versus the Packers because you've got Mike McCarthy, former Packer coach, right, who we all thought was the world's worst coach, now aging a little differently because this Dallas team is playing better than the Packers are. But you're going to have Rodgers go against Mike McCarthy. If Rodgers gets his ass handed to him in a hat by the Dallas Cowboys defense, which let's just go ahead and prep ourselves up for this, he probably will, okay? He probably will. If that does happen, I do think that what we'll see is Rodgers showing up on the injury report as questionable. Then we'll start to see non-practices on Thursday and Friday. Then we'll see doubtful for the game. They won't say that he's not going to play. They'll say doubtful for the game. It'll be a game time decision, and then they'll put Jordan Love in to play the game versus the Titans, because this thing is over. When they lose to Dallas on Sunday, and Packer fans, steel yourself for this outcome. When they lose to the Cowboys on Sunday, then I can start to see the rest of those coordinated wheels falling off, if you will.
It looks like, I think this is Joe Deguana. One clarification from our talk today, boys. I misspoke. Jordan Love, 5th-year option, takes effect in 2024, guaranteed $20 million. And then I don't know if this was him again, but Love, $3.9 million in 2023. The other thing about that is, so they play the Cowboys on Sunday, then it's a short week, and they host the Titans on Thursday Night Football.
Not good.
So, yeah, when you're struggling a short week like that, and the fact that your bye week is not till week 14, they could have used a bye week sooner. I think they'll win during the bye week, but it's unclear. Right? You know what I mean? Like those bye weeks, I think when you're rolling, sucks. because you don't want to disrupt, like the Eagles. The Eagles, like, they don't want to buy. They're like, hey, we're just going to keep rolling. But when you're struggling and you're sucking your hind tit like the Packers are, you're like, God, when is the bye week? We need the bye week. And they've got 2 more weeks of, well, one for sure. I don't think they're going to beat the Cowboys. They could beat the Titans. We'll see what happens. I think Ryan, I don't know how long.
The Titans went toe-to-toe with Kansas City in Kansas City and lost overtime with a backup quarterback.
Hey, silver lining. I'm looking for some hope here. I'm saying if they have a shot the next 2 weeks, it's going to be against the Titans, not against the Cowboys. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that in principle. Okay. I was watching this Titans team 5-2 nearly beat Kansas City last night again with Malik Willis at quarterback, which
he was pretty good.
Not as terrible as you might have thought.
No.
And Tennessee team, again, they're well coached. I'm really just gonna have to lay this out here. There is nothing left for the Packers to gain by playing Rodgers. There just really isn't. They're not going to beat the Cowboys. They're not going to beat the Titans. They're not going to beat anybody. And now you've got to look at this objectively. It's not the NBA, Chad, where you go into a draft lottery and you're guaranteed 14%.
Right.
The race to the number 1 pick starts now. And the Packers aren't that far off from being the worst team in the NFL. The Lions just doubled their wins yesterday. They doubled their entire season win total yesterday against the Green Bay Packers.
The good news is you don't have to intentionally tank if you're the Packers. All you have to do is just continue to play the way you're playing.
Right.
You don't have to, you know what I mean? It's like no one's going to accuse you of throwing the season. You just suck. So, I mean, you actually would deserve it, which is kind of refreshing in today's sports. Jeremy Foreman checking in. He says, as a 49er fan in Wisconsin, I would love to see Rodgers play the rest of the year. A couple exclamation points. I've never been happier to have Jimmy G. Yeah, I think at this point, I would agree with you as a 49er fan. I wasn't necessarily on that bandwagon a couple of weeks ago, but I am now. And obviously they had their bye week, so they're all rested up.
Listen, Chad, I was of the opinion that a couple of seasons ago when Rodgers wanted to turn heel and make all of this about him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just trade him to the 49ers, get those draft picks and Jimmy Garoppolo. Let Jimmy Garoppolo play quarterback under a Matt LaFleur system, which, again, is heavily predicated on, read option, running the – you know what it reminds me of? The Kyle Shanahan system. Wow. That just came out of the complete blue. Listen, before we go, Chad, if you wouldn't mind, bring up that Badger slide because I want to just make sure.
Get some good news in here, do you?
Yeah, we want to hit a little good news here because, look, we've been talking a lot of Packers and we'll continue throughout this week, but over the weekend, the state of Wisconsin really did have a great winning weekend. Now, the Bucks, they're going to be in Atlanta tonight versus the Hawks at 7:15 on Bally Sports. Giannis sat out the game against the Thunder. The Bucks rolled and still won. But Giannis had his first triple-double of the season, Chad, on Friday against the Timberwolves. That was a really good game and really fun to watch. So we'll talk more Bucks, but the Wisconsin Badgers and Badger-associated Badger news, Johnny Davis, I just wanted to touch on real quick, too, because Jim Leonard's now 3-1 as the interim head coach of the Badgers. Huge game on the ground for Wisconsin. Braylon Allen, you see in this little graphic, had 233 yards. That was monstrous. And Johnny Davis from La Crosse Central High School, who has not been playing really any significant time with the Wizards, has now been in the G League for 2 games since the G League started just last week. And in his second game, Chad, Johnny had a great one. And this is something that I think can really go a long way in reestablishing some of his confidence. Johnny went in his second game for the Wizards G League team, went 6 for 7 from the field, 3 for 3 from downtown, which is important, had 17 points, 4 boards, and 3 blocks. Now, in 2 games in the G League, Johnny Davis has 5 total blocks. And Chad, when we talked to Bailey Kale, who was spending time with Johnny in Washington last week as the Wizards hosted the Nets, we were talking about some player comps for Johnny Davis. The way that I like to see Davis play is like he is in the G League right now. That's the kind of Jimmy Butler-esque sort of performance that you really like to see. An effective night from the field, but a scrappy defender and somebody that goes up and challenges shots. If this kid can do that on a consistent basis for Washington's G League team, I think it's going to be nothing more than a matter of time before he's a regular rotational piece in that Washington lineup. They didn't draft him in the top 10 for no fucking reason, right? He's going to see some time. But what we saw of him in the G League is really impressive. Now, if you want to watch Johnny, and this is, I believe, something you can do for free, just look up the NBA G League's website. I'm pretty sure you can watch
find in the G spot. It's find the G spot is what it is, I believe. So you find the G spot, you can watch the game.
And with that, we say goodbye to a Monday edition of the Sports Carnival. Chad, well done as always. And thanks to our great supporters, Kyle Cable, One Trust Real Estate, Preferred Insurance, Tony Russo, Brian Sandmeyer, Midwest Mortgage Team, Mike Garcia, Todd Vercruz, of course, the Recovery Room, Sean O'Neill's O'Neill Law Center, and Joe's Helping Hands Landscaping. Fellas, we appreciate y'all so much. Have a great rest of your day. We're back bright and early tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock.